I'm sure some people are new to my show, so allow me to introduce myself. My name's Jahns. Jeremy Jahns. Skyfall. So Skyfall is the newest addition in the 007 franchise and the third Bond movie with Daniel Craig as James Bond. Second if you don't count Quantum of Solace like most normal human beings on the face of the planet. And in Skyfall we get a very different James Bond type of story. First of all, James Bond, as you can tell when you just look at the guy, you're like, hey, you look like you're aging. And so in this movie they totally play off of that. James Bond has fallen from grace. He comes back because there's this terrorist that's just going after MI6 and James Bond is one rusty bastard. Now that could make for a really boring James Bond movie, but it's not. I mean, from the intro of the movie, you have this sweet action scene, then you have the James Bond intro, and you're like, this song is awesome, the visuals are badass, and after that, you get the James Bond movie that, in my opinion, it's the one we deserve, and the one we need. Because Casino Royale is still my favorite Bond movie, I loved it, but old school Bond fans were like, it kind of alienates us because it's such a new take on James Bond, it has none of the old school James Bond isms in it. It was a reboot of the Bond franchise in every way possible. Skyfall was what Casino Royale was in terms of a darker, more realistic James Bond, but it had enough old school fun throwbacks and references to old school James Bond movies, so those James Bond fans can be like, oh yeah, the movie's including us in it also. So fans of Casino Royale should love Skyfall, old school Bond fans should love Skyfall. Basically, Skyfall is just all around likable. Why it worked? It's very simple. First of all, we'll touch on the dialogue and the characters. Both are great and both work well together. Daniel Craig is James Bond. He's my favorite James Bond because he's smooth and he's a ladies man, but in that tough guy kind of way. He looks like he can charm a chick, but yet still kick ass. He's not like Hank Moody with a gun where you're like, oh yeah, you can get chicks, and well, the script says you will win, and that's why you'll win. You feel like Daniel Craig just earns it all. Judi Dench as M, I love Judi Dench as M more and more every time I see her, and in Skyfall this is no exception. Judi Dench is great as M. And what I like is characters like Judi Dench as M and the new Q, who is also good. They're relevant pieces in this movie. They're not just there for the sake of like, oh yeah, Judi Dench as M, and she's in this movie because they need an M. Oh, a new young face is Q. He's in the movie because people wanted to see Q back. They're actually relevant as part of the plot in the movie, and they do stuff that matters. They're not just character filler. I love that. And the dialogue between James Bond and these characters is fantastic. It shows that he has a relationship with these people. Judi Dench and James Bond, they bicker back and forth, but you can tell there's like, you know, this mother-son type of relationship there. James Bond and Q, they bicker back and forth. At first he's like, look how young you are. So they have fantastic dialogue back and forth, and you can tell that moment where they're like, yeah, I respect you now because you held your own verbally against me. And one of the chicks in this movie, the dialogue between her and James Bond was completely interesting also. She's a spy, so she's sexy and efficient, and they have their sexual tension, so they have their banter back and forth, which makes her completely relevant. Like, of the Bond girls that I remember, she is by far the most interesting. And I love that. I mean, people who want their Bond chick for the sake of a hot Bond chick being a Bond chick, well, yeah, she's in this movie too, and she is really hot. However, if you want a hot, relevant chick, it's this chick that works with James Bond because it's all about the pursuit. It's like they finally learned. They're like, you know what? The hunt is sweeter than the kill. So we'll have sexual tension and banter between James Bond and this chick, and that will be 100 times more interesting than James Bond just nailing some other chick. And let's just touch on it here. Javier Bardem is the bad guy. The dude is completely villainously evil and awesome. He is pissed off. He is on a vendetta, and you're like, this guy, when he talks, is just out of his mind. The first shot with him is just one still shot where he is just monologuing, walking towards the camera. There's no stitching it together. It's just one shot of him walking towards the camera talking. Great intro. The only thing that was missing from this intro is the magic trick in which he might just shove a pencil through a guy's face, but it's been done. And on that shoehorn segue, I will just go into it like this. Skyfall is like the Dark Knight of the Bond movies. It's thicker than you think it'll be. It has layers to it that you didn't expect would be there. It's a very involved movie to a surprising degree. Calling Skyfall a Bond movie is like calling The Dark Knight a Batman movie. Just doesn't quite do it justice. And the movie's shot well too. Usually I'm not one of those people like, those shots are fantastic. That's not me, but when I notice them, I notice them. So if you are one of those people that watches movies and you're like, oh my, that camera angle just did not suffice, look at Skyfall and notice that it is shot very, very well. You can tell the director put all the thought in the world to every shot in this movie. If I have any gripes about the movie, they're not really gripes, they're just like things that I feel need to be addressed. First of all, like I said, in Skyfall being like the Dark Knight of the Bond movies, it's very involved, and in that, you can't just casually watch it. You have to be in the mindset to want to watch a 2.5 hour movie that's really thick with character, really thick with plot. You can't just be like, oh, I casually want to watch a Bond movie, put in Skyfall. Again, that's not a gripe, it's actually a big compliment to the movie, but I do feel that needs to be addressed. It's not not for casual watching. And second of all, and I don't think this was done on purpose, it's just something that I noticed and it took me out of the movie for a second. I couldn't help but see the similarities between the end of Skyfall and the end of Hard Target. Yeah, I said that, Hard Target. Again, I'm not gonna hold it against this movie because I don't think the people that penned this script, arguably one of the best Bond scripts ever, were like, okay, this is solid, great dialogue, great characters. Now for the end, we're gonna rip off Hard Target. I think it's just a coincidence. It's a coincidence that I noticed, so it took me out of the movie a bit. But I'm saying, if you've seen Hard Target and you saw Skyfall, you gotta admit, you thought of it too. So great dialogue, great characters, a great Bond villain, a deeper premise than I thought I was gonna be in for, a movie that shot well, a movie with great action sequences. What is missing from this movie except an official rating that I can give it? It always leaves kind of a bad taste in my mouth to give 2 of these in 2 weeks, but I just gotta do it because in terms of Bond movie, I feel that Skyfall deserves to be awesome-tacular. Alright, so after Daniel Craig, who do you think should be the next James Bond? Whoever you think it should be, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.